So what we're going to talk about today is first off, what is a robot? Then we'll look at what's here and what might be coming. And then we'll look at the skill specific applications and then with the relevance for policy and going forward. So this is what we tend to think about as a robot. So we either have the human-like who are going to take over our jobs and replace people. And on the right, we had the more robotic, it's a machine doing our job. Kind of you're thinking of Amazon warehouses where you've got packaging boxes flying everywhere and then coming to our homes with hardly any input. But is this really what it is? Well, no, it's not. On a wider scale, they're much more than that. So a robot can be described as a form of labor-saving technology. Labor-saving can come in various forms. So the one example are robots that can work independently or be collaborative. These are known as cobots. Now we've got some examples here. On the top left, we've got surgical robots. So these enable more precision and have less invasive surgery. In the past, if you had an operation, it'd have to be huge incisions. Now you can do it with different tools that don't require the same level of invasion that makes it harder for recovery. Below that, we have welding robots. So again, with those, it enables more precision, but you still need a lot of input from the person using it. As well, it also gives the advanced techniques such as aluminium welding, which has a very specific point at which it melts. And then by having the robot, it can just work better and enable this and give some people an advantage. Then if we look in the top right, we've got a fruit picking machine. Now this is a completely different end of the scale to the first two examples. Now, fruit picking machines have been problematic. They are not as good as humans. Even the best machines today, they still aren't. So they either miss some fruit, pick it when it's not ripe, or just generally incorrectly. But fruit pickers are one of the most in-demand labor, but you just can't, so many countries struggle to get them. And they can actually still use humans in the supervision that the human can go along, work side it, pick ones it shouldn't have, or if it's going completely wrong, they can say, no, stop and start again. The classic turn off, turn back on. And then the last example is what we tend to think of as AI. The chat GPT is one of the most populous and it can be quite controversial, but it can't take all our job. It just is there to help say, can you help me this? Right, okay. But these are just some examples that we've got. But the reality of this is that it's going to be a hybrid model. So if you had a nice, happy view, it's like AI is going to take all the boring bits of our jobs. But in reality, it is not going to do that. If you had a more pessimistic view, AI and robots could make our lives harder because we have to constantly learn new skills, or it's like, oh, suddenly you can't use this because it's out of date. But in reality, you're going to have the crossovers from this. Robots and AI are going to take some of our jobs, but we'll still have to do some of the boring bits, unfortunately. We can't get rid of it all. So if we look at what the future that's going to be, we're going to have this hybrid model. To see how it's going to break down, we need to look at the strengths of both humans and the AI and robots. So on the left, we've got AI and robots. Now, what are they good at? They have the speed and automation factor, which they can do the manual, they can do the repetitive jobs that could be quite difficult, or humans just cannot replicate the speed. Back to the Amazon example, they can take packages, shift them around the factory so fast that humans can't even compete. And it's just reducing some of the complexities. So back to that welding example. But then what are humans good at? We have an applied knowledge and also dexterity. So when I'm thinking of dexterity, you think of plumbers who have to find all these bits that are tight behind, and you have to get arms down, things that it's just not worth developing a robot to do that. Some of the other strengths are ethics, which robots could learn all sorts of legal systems, but they're never going to be perfect, or not to an extent that we need them to be. You're still going to have a human say, oh, right, go with this because there are different legal systems everywhere. And the creativity, we need to think of what needs to be doing, take some application to it. So the AI and robots are only going to know what they're programmed and have that capability of, which is why it's going to be the hybrid model of taking the best of both worlds per se. So we talked about the robot revolution. Now I'm taking numbers in European context to what is here and what is becoming. So on the left-hand side, there is a map of the robots per 10,000 workers in the industrial sector. As you can see, Germany stands out a mile. They had nearly 400 robots per 10,000 workers. But in general, you can see how there is a strong link to the automotive sector. So you've got the Volkswagen Group and the other German manufacturers, but also the spillover into the neighbouring countries, such as Czechia, Poland, and Slovakia. Well, there's still that domination of robots in Germany and Sweden. Then on the right-hand side, you have AI preparedness. Now, this is a statistic developed by the IMF, which takes into account the digital infrastructure that's currently there, human capital that's there, labour market policies, the innovation and economic integration, and the regulation. So this map has a more expected link to economic development than the robots per 10,000 workers. You can see the northern countries and the western countries. The Baltic countries are a bit of the anomaly almost, but then you go down to the Balkans and it tends to be what's more expected. And then the southern countries, as we'll see later on, how they are becoming detaching from the north and the west in terms of development. So to best utilise our analysis of how robots will change our jobs, we're going to break them down by skill. So first, we're going to look at low-skill jobs. We define these as ones that do not require training, experience, or knowledge to perform or complete. Now, where is this going to have the biggest effect? To analyse this, we take the population in the graph, which shows the percentage of the population that has low education, including no, or if you're familiar with the ICED scale, it's 0 to 2. So it includes some of the candidate countries, such as Turkey, which has they are more than 50%. Also, the standout countries are Portugal, Spain, and Italy, which is a high concern. So low skill is a generalization. All of these jobs have a high degree of repetitiveness, which is what we think robots are going to take. And these category of people have most difficulty for upskilling and learning. But what are the opportunities for these? So they can reskill programs in the logistics, which makes some jobs accessible to lower skill workers. But we also need to emphasize the importance of education and developing this as for the future. So given that, what are some examples of low skill professions? So you've got from construction, where it's just labourers moving stuff, and then cleaning or cleaners, and other ones within retail, hospitality, agriculture and food, and then the warehouse and logistics. So statistically, who is the most vulnerable within this category? This is not just me saying whatever. There is actually a study that uses over 700 professions and looks at them. So the least vulnerable include security guards, childcare workers, and concierges. You'll notice that these all have a human factor. Nobody at the minute is going to feel comfortable sending their child to a nursery where they just going to be robots. You're going to panic, and they also have the problem, or the human worker has the advantage that they can adapt to situations which a robot may not have the ability to. But most vulnerable, cargo and freight agents. So it's safer and easier to do this with robots. And even if you think to big cargo ships, computers are planning on how to load ships. So they take into account weight, and then we will load it to where it will also be needed to taken off, whether it's Amsterdam, back in China, or in the US. How long is it going to be on the boat? You think of the Suez Canal when it was blocked a few years ago, and how that kind of caused a huge disruption to it. So when we're looking at farm labour contractors, the tech is finally starting to get here. Not to quite an advanced level, but it is getting there. And then office clerks, this is simply data entry, which AI and technology is able to just read data, which is going to reduce the need for them. This isn't going to completely eliminate them, but it is going to reduce the demand for these careers. So one aspect that needs explaining more is how there is the opportunity for downscaling tasks. So by this, I mean taking a medium skill job and then with some AI or robots, making that able to be done by a low skill job. This can't be done with everything, but there are opportunities for this. So one that's quite common is food. To go and have pre-prepared food, you used to need to go to a restaurant that it has to be done by a chef. Now you can get fast food, which is done by workers who are low skill. It's that technology that are bringing it down. However, there are some examples that are just not here yet. If we think of the lorry driver, then self-driving cars are not yet safe enough to be on the road. There is assistance for it. So, for example, lorries, you can have increased braking technology, but at the minute, not even in the US, where they had slightly looser regulations about self-driving cars, it will at some point probably be able that you can have someone who is sat in a office or a warehouse monitoring the lorry where it's going, but there is actually just a self-driving lorry, if you like. But again, that is going to be far off. That is we move to medium skill jobs. So this time they do require some sort of knowledge and whether it's tools, technology, communication, but importantly, it's needing some upper or post-secondary education, not tertiary, but some which will take that. Experience is an asset rather than a requirement. They then have, we take to the map again, and this is the axis is inverted this time, but the yellow still highlights the problem areas. So Turkey again has a low proportion of vocational, medium skill or medium educated workers. Now this includes, the graphic includes both vocational and generalized education levels. Now we had the perception that the medium educated workers are ones that are going to be most vulnerable simply because they, or not the most vulnerable, but is most threatened and on the news because that is what usually makes up the majority of the population. So these workers are probably going to be affected by job transformation rather than elimination. So taking some of the most automated or repetitive tasks and then allowing the human to do what they are good at. So what is going to be important for these people is upskilling in AI literacy, how to work with the robots. So this is not something that you can come out of school and say, right, that's my career for the rest of life. Even 10, 15 years ago, National Geographic did this presentation of where it was, we're educating people in school for jobs that do not yet exist. This is only going to accelerate. So we're going to need everyone to keep learning and managing these new systems as technology develops. So as I said, medium educated workers, that is the biggest population group usually. So you've got a much greater range of what they can do. You can have manufacturing and engineering to health and social care and IT. You're covering this whole span. But one of the things you tend to think of is skilled trades. Now, whether this is an electrician or a hairdresser, these are ones that need that dexterity to be able to do specific tasks that robots can't necessarily reach, or you're not going to want them to do. So what's most vulnerable? Again, statistically, now construction supervisor managers instinctively think, oh, that's quite a boring job, you can delegate it. But in actual fact, me or you are going to struggle to have respect for a robot that's a manager. You're just going to don't really want to listen to you. So you're going to need someone to actually do it. And also, especially if it's going on site, then you're going to need to have, oops, someone came through a message. There we go. So you're going to have someone that can walk around. You can't send a robot going on site. And then also foresters and plumbers, again, that dexterity. And with the nurses, it's the human factor again. Now, vulnerable careers are, in the case of jewelers, that's the precision, in that robots can have much greater degree of accuracy and the tools that they can use, whether it be lasers or different tools. And the second two examples, secretaries and tax account preparers, it's data entry. And as long as it's general secretaries rather than medical or legal secretaries, which they do have that higher degree of risk, just the general secretaries are able to have some of their job replaced. And downskilling. So I gave the examples before of medium to low. You've still got that opportunity of high to low skill tasks. One of the big examples that we've got is now software developers, whereas before you used to have a high degree of training, go to university, have a tertiary degree. Now there are, or I guess, bigger apps or programs that enable a medium skill work. So you've got to have the use of a computer and understanding, but you can have them developing apps. So, for example, there are predetermined codes. So you want a button to do this. You can then select the color or the function to what page you want to go to. And it's all predetermined. You just a drag and drop type thing. So these are some of the examples that are here. The ones that there tend to be here already, and they're only going to develop further. You also have the opportunity for specialized upskilling. So this is when we come to STEM careers, in the fact that young people are put off by doing STEM careers because they think it's so difficult and they cannot get to that level. But you had so many teenagers that are interested in robotics, programming, software. So you can take what they are good at in STEM subjects, that may be a narrow gap. You can then take it towards like get them to do this part of the university course in conjunction with an employer. So these high level vocational trainings. Now, if we go to high skill jobs, these typically involve having a tertiary education or at the very least extensive experience of a medium level job, at which you need this high level knowledge and expertise. And what is key with this is that it's a different type of human factor. So whereas childcare workers, where it's just a human person, this is having the ability to have the thoughts and innovation. And also communication is key here. And experience is still the asset. So where is this a problem or strength in Europe? Here you've got where there is a percentage of those with a tertiary education. So this is going from short cycle all the way up to PhDs. You have Ireland where 50% of people have a tertiary degree. Now, seeing, oh, great, we've got lots of people with the university degree, that in itself is not a perfect replication of whether it's a good scenario. For example, if you've got lots of people who have degrees in subjects that aren't that going to be useful in the long run, then that's not great. But if you have ones that are high in sciences, engineering, applied ones that are good for the long run, then that's good. But so one of the challenges that they're going to face is some of the complex tasks are going to be able to be simplified. So, for example, there is medical diagnostics, which they can't do it all, but in China they tested what doctors were able to diagnose versus automated technology. The computer got it right more of the time, but when it was wrong, it was really wrong. So you can take the advantages of both and have the human doctor checking it and going through and thinking, oh, this is it. And it may miss things that you cannot see by the naked eye if it's a scan or something. So these individuals are going to have to master this technology. But what is important is taking the boring parts, the repetitiveness out of their jobs, allows them to focus on what they are good at. Now, what type of careers are they? Because they tend to be more specialized, there are fewer rather than compared to the medium skill or medium educated. You've got government policy, healthcare, medicine, STEM, or business and legal, and then academic and research, all of which are important going forward. Now, statistically, what is least vulnerable? Archaeologists, they have to go on site, dig things up, so that's very needing to be able to use body and go forward. So even though it's a high skill job, you need lots of dexterity for it. Then doctors, dentists, teachers, that's the human factor as well. Whereas most vulnerable, you've got accountants, which is a lot of data entry and supervision, geoscientists, and historians. Now, this is not getting rid of these careers, these jobs entirely. It's reducing the demand for these people. If you're able to take a lot of the job out, you need less supervision. Now, is ChatGPT going to save us? Well, ChatGPT went down in January, and even though this is quite humorous, it didn't save us. People were, oh, we actually have to do something. When no, it's more a complement than a substitute for people. And we also have to consider environmentally. ChatGPT uses a huge amount of water and electricity. Now, putting into this in context, per day, on average, ChatGPT estimates say it uses 150 million litres of water just to keep the computers cool. And in terms of electricity, you could charge 8 million phones, or you could power the Empire State Building for more than 500 days. Just putting that into context, when that all happens in one day, that's not a green, sustainable future that we need to work for. But if we put this in a perspective that we can more relate to, take it from a firm that does not have an in-house lawyer. If cost is an issue and there's not much low risk, so for example, you just want to write something, put it on and say, oh, do you need to check this? Nah, not really. You can just use ChatGPT or an equivalent AI technology. If it's then a more medium risk, you think borderline, which could you do? Then you can look, depending upon the specific situation, whether it's worth hiring a lawyer. But if it's high risk, you need a lawyer to the gold standard, you're going to get that lawyer, just deal with it, even if it's expensive and you're having to risk other parts of your budget. So what if costs can be found? And when it's a low risk, you can have that option to use AI. But even if that then starts to have a medium risk, you're going to pay for that lawyer to cover you because the legal implications could be huge. And again, if it's high risk, you're just going to get the lawyer. If cost is not an issue, just get the lawyer. You're covered and you don't have to be worrying about, oh, are we going to be okay? Now, if we put some more generalized technologies, an example, are you going to get on a plane without a pilot? Autopilot has been around for decades, but if you ask people, were they going to get on the plane without the pilot? No, you're just going to say, oh, I want this pilot. Equally, surgery without a surgeon, you want a doctor to be there in case someone goes wrong, whether it's the anaesthetist or the actual surgeon. You want them to be able to think on their feet, which you might not fully trust a robot to do. They're all using technology, but you still need the human worker. Now, we've done some case studies in our research. So Germany, they had high labour shortages, especially in the high skill sector, and an aging population. So their policy outlooks is investing in AI and the high skill robots that can let the humans focus on what their job is. And then also increase that vocational training. So they have quite a decent population that have the intermediate education. So by taking the ones that can have the possibility to get partial advanced training, that advanced vocational skill I mentioned earlier, then that's good for them. And also the downskilling technology. Sweden, they have high labour shortages, but as well, and high employment rates. So it's not as if they can get more activated or more people activated and it's going to solve their problems. Their main focus is, or the opportunities are in the medium skill sector, which they relatively struggle with. And I mentioned AI specifically because Sweden is home to some of the biggest tech companies, such as you think of Spotify. They've had the problem that because of various constraints or social problems, they've shifted a lot of their officers' workforce to the US. Now, given recent events, they now have the opportunity to actually bring them back in the fact that there are certain controversial issues with the current US administration, which is beyond what I'm talking about today. But they now have the opportunity to keep them or bring them back. Not just Swedish nationals that had emigrated, but also the funding opportunities through other research technology to come here and have some of the freedom. Then you have Italy. Now they have one of the problems that they had the old age dependency ratio is one of the highest and is going to keep being one of the highest. They had the low education, low employment rates, and it's going to be at the stage in the future where the working population is half of their total population, which is just not it's just not sustainable. So they're going to need to adapt to their situations, upskill. There is a financial constraint from the point of the government. However, there are ways of working around this. They need to also activate the workforce, which is one of the lowest employment rates in Europe, and then also invest in productivity enhancing. They are actually one of the least productive countries within Europe. Now, Poland, excuse me, they are the high demand of all skill. They have for years been one of the largest senders of migrants in Europe and are quite opposed to immigration. While immigration is not a long-term solution, they have one of the lower uses of robots and AI in Europe. Kind of medium when you take into account the Eastern European countries, but significantly behind Western and Northern Europe. Using these robots and AI allows greater productivity, and it will also enable skill specialization, which they are good at. They have some of the highest vocational training in Europe. So what are the opportunities and challenges? If we again continue to look at low skill, sorry, by skill, some jobs are going to be replaced or filled by robots. New ones are going to emerge, and the low skill, it's going to make some of the medium skill jobs accessible by the AI systems or robots, or whichever job-saving technology, labor-saving technology you'd like to define it as. The medium scale, AI will help enhance AI or robots will enhance the efficiency, allowing one worker to be able to do more than they currently are. They will have this lifelong learning to keep up with technology. And then if we look at the high skill, we can focus this on downgradable and non-downgradable. So the ones that are downgradable, we can adapt the medium workers and then also maximize the productivity of both of them. What is important to remember is that across all levels, new professions are going to occur, which when it's the high skill workers, they have the best adaptability to take skills that they currently have, the industries that might be have lots of reduction in number of workers they need, but they can transfer their skills. For example, financial analysis. They can be good with computers, so they can then transfer their skills to ones that are needing computers, whether it be cybersecurity or ones along those lines. Either way, it's going to allow greater productivity and you can have more skill specialization. So policy perspective, what does this going to hold for us? So on a country basis, you need to identify the most important problem to help find a solution. For all the countries in the analysis in Europe, there are different problems, but you can take these in isolation and try and use different policies to get towards that. And importantly, we need to go with robots and AI is going to help us. They're not going to take our jobs. There's just too much realistic constraints, whether financially or practically, that robots aren't going to take our jobs. So if we work with them, it's going to maximize the existing workforce that we've got. So we're all facing the aging problem, of which migration is not a solution. Automation isn't a solution for the reasons we mentioned so far. And we also need to focus on reskilling throughout your career. We cannot finish our education at 18, 21 or whatever stage and then just say we're set for life. Investing in education throughout our working lives is going to be important. And from a longer term perspective, European countries working together will also make Europe more attractive in the long run. So we can have, or each country can make use of their comparative advantage. So we need to decide what the future will be. Are we going to take AI and robots as a partner, coexistence, or are we just going to say, oh, robots are going to take over and give up? We need to look at partners and coexistence. Thank you for listening. I look forward to our discussions.